I think the last time we talked, like publicly, in this kind of way, we ended up starting by talking about how terribly long we've known each other. And just to be consistent with that, I thought I'd mention it again, but really only to say that it's an honor and a privilege to have known you as long as I have, to invested all that. Like, we've lost so many friends along the way. It's great. We get to enjoy these moments together. But as special as it is to know Joe Coleman, I don't think it's all that unique. I hazard there's many people in this room who know you as well, if not better, than me. And I'm leading to a question, I promise you. How long is this guy going to blather on for? It's that you know yourself, and you've been kind of digging for as long as I know. You've been really excavating Joe Coleman, and shared yourself in some of the most raw ways possible, inside and out. And I'd like to ask you about that process, which is kind of a half century now of just really digging at who you are and discovering.
Well, I mean,
I wanted to start with a soft one.
Yeah, no, thanks for just easing into it. Yeah, I mean, that's you're like my shrink now. That's usually the way these are conducted. I've pushed, the boundaries, in myself, for many, many years now, and primarily I'm a painter now, but when I was doing, especially the early performance stuff, I mean, I pushed myself to do things, that put my life in danger, that my sanity, and my freedom, but I've also, I pushed that in my paintings as well. I try to go, to places that other people don't want to go, and it's to gain a knowledge of myself, though, in that journey. Like, I'm trying to find the humanity in the humanity that's around me, and the many portraits that I've done, throughout, some, more than 40 years. I've often sought, a real connection to the subject, that I need to have some physical connection to the subject that I'm painting. In some cases, it's somebody that I hadn't, met yet, but I was obsessed by, like Hazel Atkins, which some people think is Hazel Atkins, but it's really pronounced Hazel, in Boone County, West Virginia. That's the right pronunciation. I was obsessed with his music, and through painting him, though, he became a really dear friend of mine. He loved the painting. I sent him a reproduction of it, and we became dear friends. And he performed at our wedding, and that's an example of me becoming connected to the person from a distance. But also in the case of Indian Larry, who is the chopper builder, who a lot of you know, he was a really, really dear friend of mine, married to our adopted daughter, Bambi the mermaid. And Larry always wanted me to work on one of his bikes with him, and I didn't really want to, but when he died tragically, I felt compelled to work on that project that he wanted me to work on all those years. Sorry. I still brings emotion to me when I think about Larry. So after Larry died, then I began investigating, his life, and so then the process, of learning about Larry, like interviewing his friends and family, which is the process that I use for all of my paintings. It's like writing a novel, and all that information is filtered through me during the process of painting. I don't pre-sketch, so it's all appearing as I'm painting. As anyone who's actually seen me work, it's, I start on a square inch and I just add another square inch and another square inch. The only time I know I'm finished with the painting is when I run out of room. But I don't stop there, like in the case of Indian Larry, who I was talking about, I needed to, make this frame for it, and I decided to use, one of Larry's, striped, red striped biker shirts to mount the painting on, and then the actual frame was made up of motorcycle parts of bikes that he never completed, and I used that to create the frame, and I had the thing put together by Paul Cox and Kano, who worked at Larry's shop. I had them weld the pieces together so it would be even more connected to Larry. And then I had his friends connect Indian head pennies that I then, it was several hundred Indian head pennies to glue around the frame that houses the painting. So in that, sorry, I don't go on for a long time.
It's all good.
And I actually wanted to add one, just a couple of other things, and then I'll let you get your next question. So, that's an example of someone who I knew and loved that I then paint. But what I wanted to say was that even when I'm doing a historical subject, like say when I was doing the painting of Albert Fish, one of the most heinous, psychopaths in American history, during the process of painting his portrait, I came across the letter that Albert Fish wrote to the mother of his last victim. And I'll tell you what happened. I was just doing the research, so I did the typical thing of, going to the precinct that houses the artifacts, and I filled out all the necessary papers, and I handed those in, and the very bored person that was working there made a Xerox copy of the letter, and then handed me the actual letter. And I looked up, and she was back, working with the files, and I looked at the letter, and then I realized I think I even said to the letter, "You want to come home with Uncle Joe?" So, come on, let's go home. so then, then I had this real connection to the person that I'm painting. So I always seek that, and some of the historical figures I also then attach these artifacts to the frame of the painting. In that way, it houses a bit of the soul or essence of the person or subject that I'm honoring. I mean, it's hard to say honoring to someone like Albert Fish, but it is a form, of devotion for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's largely what I was going to ask you about with that, because I do think there's a beautiful turn in your work when you start, you could say your community, but it's really like your family. And
Yeah.
But earlier, a lot of your portraits were of people who are more problematic in our culture, shall we say. And I remember with the Albert Fish thing, I think if not everyone here knows it, kind of the beautiful punchline of that letter is writing the last victim's mom. He wanted, even though he ate her, I think, but he wanted her to know that she was like not violated. He didn't do that to her. And it was supposed to be some comfort, right? Am I getting that
Well,
right?
yes. This was something about the letter that was really striking to me, because it's written in the letter, I did not fuck her, though I could. Had I wished, she died a virgin. And then he underlines virgin. And throughout the trial, he kept saying, I did not defiling her. I did not defile her. As if cutting her up in pieces and eating her is not defiling her. But what became fascinating to me was, in fact, he's pointing out, a fundamental, problem, in the Christian culture, in America, that feels that violence is okay because, all of the saints, the martyred saints, have some horrible atrocity done to them. And that's in the violence and in the suffering, that's where the transformation takes place to become a deity. And the horrible, unforgivable sin is sex. And to me, that by his very existence in the history of criminology, in America, he also points out something about America, a certain shame, and to me, it made the case worthy, of the painting.
And then, so when you include like an artifact in the framing and things like that, are you thinking of it by those, horribly Catholic terms of like a reliquary? Is some sort of like vessel of the soul, and how iconography works with that as well?
Yes, it is intentional. For sure, these are devotional paintings, but even though I was brought up Catholic, and I like to say Irish Catholic because I think the Celtic pagan influence, in my upbringing also influences the paintings. And I don't know if there is a God, and I don't believe in Catholicism to me is, I don't believe in the rhetoric, and the hypocrisy that I see.
You're still somewhat seduced by a bit of the fire and brimstone or something?
I
was raised an atheist, so you people are all so damn alien to me.
Well, yes, I mean, I could see that. But I am seduced, but I'm seduced by the drama, you know, and the ritual, and the, you know, the commitment, you know, the full-on commitment to, you know, to it, you know, and even though I no longer believe, you know, in, you know, I'm not, I have to say that I don't think living creatures need to know what happens after death. So I think that is not important.
No, we need to make something up to,
Yeah.
seems to be a part of our DNA.
But those aspects of like heaven and hell, I mean, well, yeah, they exist right here on this planet. But the other crap and the way it's used, you know, to terrorize, you know, and enforce, you know, a rule, that I don't trust. But I do trust faith, you know. But it's the faith in painting, you know, the faith in storytelling, the faith in, you know, in love, you know, and
This is, yeah, it's what's called a secular humanist, if you ever have to.
well, if you want to call me something, I can call a lot worse things than that.
But, you know, I just can't resist. This is such a compendious, deep, rich book, and it brings up so many earlier histories that I love of yours, especially the beginning when before you really went full-time to this fine art practice, studio practice. So these kind of vernacular things, and I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about, because we haven't talked about this stuff in decades. So maybe starting a little bit with the comics is an easy one. And for me, I just think about like, okay, I could argue, either way, I could argue that you're painting the way you're compressing narrative while you're kind of fracturing it is similar to comics, but I could also argue it's also really dissimilar. So that kind of narrative, because you're working in a narrative painter, you're not just a figurative artist, you're a narrative artist, right? So, like, can you talk about how comics have informed the way you do these paintings inch by inch, which is maybe not as planned out as a comic, but ultimately another kind of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I do find my comics were definitely, you know, connected to painting. But the reason why I started doing comics, well, in childhood, I was recreating, you know, images of the Stations of the Cross that I saw in my Catholic church first. But then later, I was also making my own comics, you know, very primitive comics, you know. So they were always interconnected, I think, inside of me. But I think I love painting the most, though. But I felt at one time, especially, you know, in the 70s, and it was hard to get your work seen by a large group of people, and comics were cheaply mass-produced, you know, and could get, you know, a wide audience.
Well, your comics were a little more luxe than that, though, right?
Well, but they, you know, I would be able to get a painting, you know, on the cover, but all the interior had to be black and white. So, you know, I really couldn't explore my love for color, you know, and for the quality of painting. You know, I don't know if you know, but my comics, you know, were done with a brush too, and I used this duotone paper that was used by a lot of the EC cartoonists who I liked, and that's also something that you can paint on to the board that you're making the comic panels in, and you paint different layers of tone, and I enjoyed where I could use painting, you know, in those early comics that I did.
Yeah. I mean, to me, they have a similar intensity and level of concentration. I imagine you were more prolific with them than you can be in some of these big paintings you do now, but they still really focused in that way. Let's think about, like, also, because they all do kind of bleed into each other, the kind of performative aspects of your work, and easiest maybe to start with your band, Steel Tips, you did, which is like kind
There's a couple of members of Steel Tips over there. Patrick and Karen, who've been married ever since Steel Tips, which is pretty awesome.
I guess if you can make it through that, you're stuck with each other. You know, to me, I mean, so to locate that in place and time would be like CBGB's in the 70s, which is sort of kind of ground zero for punk rock. But, you know, punk rock, I'm going to say something that's really a question. Put a question mark at the end. There's an idea that punk is like this kind of style of music, a genre, like something that, like, some band in England got transplanted to Orange County. But of course, for us, maybe it was more of an attitude. And stylistically, your band was more like a nasty-ass biker band, I always felt. Probably mischaracterizing it. But can you talk about, if you hit comics at a time, maybe a little past its glory years of the underground comics of the 60s, but still vital medium, very much in the 70s at that time. There were stores that still sold that stuff. I guess it's all back now. But you were also taking another ready vehicle of youth culture with music, and just, I don't know where I'm going, you just take it from there.
Well, you know, for me, it wasn't as much about the music, even though, you know, music was a part of Steel Tips. I was more into the performance aspect, you know, of shows that we were doing. And, you know, and then I did my own thing, which was, you know, what I kind of call Dr. Mambuzu. Like in Steel Tips, I don't know if you remember, I call myself Mad Dog. So actually, when I left Steel Tips, then I was Dr. Mambuzu.
Which is more like your Carney Barker persona.
Yeah, yeah, and so it was like taking all the music out of it and just, you know, pure, you know, frightening
aesthetic terrorism, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I was called, yeah. But to me, that, you know, that was the most interesting for me, was to really, you know, push the boundaries, you know, of the stage, you know, where does performance end? Does it end at the tip of the stage, and how, you know?
Not if you're throwing shit at the audience. You know, I've always thought, like, desire is kind of contagious, like the way a kind of gaze can be transferred. And before I really, like, knew you that well, there was this guy everyone adores him, this squirrely, like, pathetic Frenchman philosopher, Sylvain L'Étranger.
Yeah.
And he would talk rhapsodically about the event, I think he did at the Kitchen, the old Kitchen, at the time, for his magazine Semiotext, the transgression issue. And you had so crossed the boundaries. You crossed every line, you obliterated them. And literally scared the hell out of everyone in the room. And it just, you know,
yeah, that's when I chased the Kitchen out with the shotgun after I poured live animals on my head and bit their heads off and threw them at the audience.
Yeah, that's right. At the end, you went to the director or whoever was
Put the shotgun.
Put a shotgun in their head.
How'd you like the show? It was good. I really liked it.
Yeah.
But, I was getting arrested for all of those shows.
Yeah, I remember
But,
getting arrested.
it was part of, even the arrest was part of the show, and because it taught me things that I hadn't put in my performance, like when I was arrested at the Boston Film and Video Arts Foundation, and they charged me with being in possession of an infernal machine.
Oh, I thought they called you an infernal machine.
That's what, yeah. Because that's what I asked my lawyer. I asked my lawyer, what? I don't understand. What is this charge? Possession of an infernal machine. What's the infernal machine? And my lawyer said, Joe, you're the infernal machine.
Yeah.
But, like when I was biting the heads off of mice, and then the press would, I was actually, it was spearheaded by Bob Barker when the Mondo, New York film came out, and the guy's name is Barker, Bob Barker. He's the game show host for Miss
Real
America.
animal rights guy, right?
Yeah, for Miss America pageant, and but his name is Barker.
And so you're
And
like,
he's talking about,
the
he's talking about the geek. No, it's not verses, because he was actually coming up. You gotta see this rad man bites the heads off of live animals. And like that was something that the world then threw back at me and said, oh, you think that's funny what you did, Joe? Look at this. I was like, wow. And then the press was, asking me about it. And I said, well, which is not how to build a better mousetrap we should be talking about today. It's how to be a better mousetrap. And I was like, rat bites man, that's not news, but man bites rat, now you got a story.
So as you're like dancing so close to these lines all the time with all these, also we could talk about underground cinema, which you're part of a lot of those roles. But when you're doing this, it's like, how much are you do you remember now? How much were you losing yourself in the moment, and how much were you maintaining control so you didn't fall off a cliff?
I wasn't controlling myself at all. I was a loose cannon. I was a problem.
Is there like a kind of feedback with the audience, like it happens, like whatever from Iggy on, where there's a kind of bloodlust, and like people would be just so disappointed if you didn't blow yourself up at the end or do something really outrageous, and you're kind of also being goaded?
I guess, but I didn't do. I usually prefer to, do those performances in a place where I wasn't expected to be there. Like the high school reunion.
Right. That was a really nasty prank, wasn't it?
I appeared as a guy who had died 5 years earlier in a car accident to the high school reunion. And I put all the scars on my face.
A lot of your work, and I think of it at that time, what was kind of so provocative about it was it kind of needed completion through something, like through Bob Barker going or like when you're arrested, like I think you're making a movie with Manuel de Landa, and
Right, fish fucking Satanist.
right,
Because that's what
He
the
did
cops
have-
called me.
yeah.
Because I had a fish sticking out of the fly of my pants when the cops arrested me.
but then when they saw like kind of fuses coming out underneath,
But they were under my shirt, and the cop was like, "What do you got there?" And he starts unbuttoning my shirt while the other cops are around me, and I said, "You got a light?"
right?
I said, "Put
So in many ways, it's like it's the cop doing that, and then your sick punchline, which sort of to me makes these.
Well, yeah,
like putting the head to the.
Yeah, what Carlo's referring to is that at the end, you know, Manuel de Landa, who's an amazing writer and philosopher, he got arrested with me, but he filmed it. You know, we're put in one cell, and the cops are looking at all the evidence and the fish and my explosives. And they're coming up with all these charges of murders that were committed on the West Side Highway, and they try to come up with all kinds of. Is it necrophilia if he fucked a dead fish? It's like all this crazy shit, and
did they do forensics to make sure that the fish was dead before he fucked it?
They had the plastic glove in the fish's mouth, and they had it under the microscope to see if there was, you know, any semen on it. And so we're in the cell the whole night hearing all the, you know, all this crazy stuff going on, and so the DA comes in, and the DA sits down with me, and I start talking about Salvador Dali and Dada, and you know, by the end of the thing, the DA is like, okay, all right, I'm gonna let you go, and you know, and we're at the release desk, and here's all those Polaroid pictures of all the evidence, you know, the fish, you know, the explosives, like all this stuff, and we're about to leave. We're almost out the door, and this new cop comes in, and he's like looking at the Polaroids. What? Holy shit! Oh my God! Did you get the monster that did this? What? And then the cop that was there the whole night, he's just sitting by the desk, and he goes, "Don't you know what that is? That's surrealism."
And this year is the 100th anniversary of surrealism. We can note that for anyone who cares about birthdays. I do wonder about that now because it's something I've contemplated a few times because I've known a few artists who gotten in trouble with the law for what they do. And there is this kind of easy instinct to kind of just start talking about art to a judge or to a cop. And generally their eyes glaze over and within 5 minutes they're like, oh fuck, it's art, like get out of here. And that's kind of great. I mean, it's sort of like, it's good a get out of jail card as anything that art will get you. But I worry a little bit about when we say it's just art, we're saying it's just art. And then kind of like do the crime, do the time. I'm not saying you should go to jail for anything, but like this sense of standing by the work in a more like, you know, criminally honorable way. Is that a way to put it?
I have no idea. I mean, I was pretty much out of my mind.
Yeah.
You know, I was driven, you know, and I was driven to, you know, you could even say that I was seduced by a madness that I allowed myself to be seduced by because I was searching desperately for something, you know, and, you know, however misguided and foolish and dangerous, all of those crazy things that I did, I did them for a kind of search for, I know it sounds crazy, but a kind of enlightenment, you know, transgression, you know, seeking transcendence.
Yeah. Well, that's like the, you know, Blake talking about like the left-hand path, whatever, the dark road leading to the palace of wisdom. And I think that was kind of built in to the nihilism of that time as much as I can remember that time. In that, like, yeah, it was really dark, but there was like a lot of hope in our anger, in our rage, whatever.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly hope. But it is desperation for sure. And you know, but for some reason, you know, I survived.
Yeah.
You know, I probably shouldn't have survived, but I did survive. And so many of my dear friends did not survive, you know, and I owe it to them, you know, to, you know, just document, you know, what it was like and where I am now, and just try to do it the best I can.
Yeah, I feel that burden of memory too. Sort of keeps us honest to some degree, because, you know, we love you all, but we're not doing it for you, we're doing it for our dead friends. Sorry. Did I say that? Excuse me. I thought the mic was off.
Yeah, but you really thought the mic was off.
Yeah, it's a hot mic. When you're cogitating around this notion of madness, how much were you anchored, you know, not by the easy trappings of surrealism, which are so easy that Madison Avenue uses them, but thinking of like visionary or symbolist traditions in art, like when did that, I know you're aware of it now, when did you kind of understand how you were working a similar visual language?
I think that I always, and you know, I still feel most connected to, you know, the religious art, you know, that I was brought up on, you know, you know, I've been obsessed with, you know, the Flemish primitives, you know, and when I was in Paris recently, I went to this amazing show of the restoration of Van Eyck's Madonna of Chancellor Roland, which took my breath away, you know, and those are things that inspire me, you know, the most, you know.
But that really is like iconography. I mean, that's sort of like the development of this kind of symbolic language.
Yeah, and every other, you know, art that I also feel connected to do echo it. You know, even if you're talking about Wolfley or Henry Darder, it's, to me, that still has that religious iconography in both of their works. You know, and you know they both do this kind of, you know, bordering, you know, and condensing, you know, and narrative obsessiveness and text being important. But that's also true of the religious painters. So these people are kindred spirits, you know, and that's why I sought them out, you know, for the love of a kindred spirit.
Yeah, and when you bring up Wolfie or Darger or something like that, I'm curious. I don't even know how you would articulate it, but your relationship to the outsider, which is really vast. One is that you painted, celebrated outsiders, outlaws, you know, cultural outsiders. And in the years, like, when you didn't really have a New York gallery, I would always catch the very first outsider art fairs in the Puck building. Joe Boxer was his name? Was it
Henry Boxer.
Henry Boxer,
Yeah,
sorry.
Henry
Joe
Boxer.
Boxer's like in underwear. But so you've always, and now you work with Andrew Edlin, which is, you know, an expansive view of it, but still very much in the milieu of outsider art. So how much do you relate to it, and how much do you understand that there's maybe a difference between you and some other outsider artists? I'm such a dick. I had to go there.
All right, you asked me this, and you probably forgot. You know, since childhood, you know, I've been, you know, obsessively creating, you know, but also, you know, I'm always, I need this one little cave to work in, you know. And, I've always kept like all the windows blocked out so that no sunlight comes in. And, you know, and I used to use a bare 100-watt bulb as my only light. I hated to use natural light. Now I use a light that's used by surgeons, you know, when they're trying to see clearly during an operation. And I always have to have this controlled, tiny little room that, you know, that I create in. And I work for 8 hours a day, barely moving my finger. I balance one finger on the surface and slowly move, you know, these minute hairs over the surface, and I caress it to life. But it's always in this controlled environment. You know, I once read that that Vincent van Gogh, you know, set up his easel outside and painted, you know, in gardens and, you know, during windstorms and rain and thunder. I always paint inside. I never painted outside.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that.
I thought so.
All right, so I think I have no other choice but to kind of give up the mic to people with their questions. We've got so many people here who knows a lot.
Good. 16? Well, no.
I only got the kids that, I always like kids.
This is great. Good, man. Thanks, bro. Here we are. Nice long line.